Welcome to the Profit Share Mastery Podcast with your hosts, Linda and Pres McKissack.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Profit Share Mastery Podcast. I'm Linda McKissack.
And I'm Pres McKissack.
And we are coming to you from Profit Share Air today. We are actually coming back from speaking and teaching in the Minneapolis region, and we wanted to do a quick podcast and just share with you kind of just some ideas and thoughts we had around when we're talking to recruits and just kind of the temperament of recruiting right now. We're excited about it. We think there's great opportunity. So we're going to kind of share with you a story about a recruit that we actually had dinner with last night.
Yeah, so let's kind of give you a little backstory to who we had dinner with and kind of walk you through how we went through that situation. As we were kind of talking about what we wanted to share with you today, we thought it'd be fun to break down a real life situation so you could kind of see how Linda and I approached working with a top agent as they consider potentially making a move. So a little backstory. First off, super sharp guy.
Oh, super sharp.
Linda in his, late 30s? Mid-30s?
Mid-30s.
Yeah, I think he was 35 or something like that. So the backstory is he had a team a couple years ago, and he ended up losing the team due to a partnership breakup. And so he's currently in rebuild mode. So he's currently rebuilding his business. He's got himself, his assistant. Year to date, he's closed about 19 units through October. And he has, according to him, a ton pending. And so it looks like, according to him, he will close around 41 total units by the end of the year. So pretty busy fourth quarter, which is good. And also, we know what that looks like, right? When you're going and blowing, right? It gets... In real estate, it gets easier. It should get easier over time. So if you imagine building your business and then losing it and then having to rebuild it, that's a lot of momentum. That's a lot of work. Linda, anything you'd add just kind of on the backstory of getting to know him?
Yeah, I would say probably, just from my experience on that, the mental part of that would be harder than anything. Because kind of once you've built one of these, you really know all the difficulties, whereas when you're doing it the first time, you're experiencing them for the first time, and so you have a little bit of naivety about what it actually takes to build that kind of business, because I think he was doing like 400 transactions or something, which is a big business. So I think probably more than anything, he was struggling mentally about how hard it actually is and what all he was going to and what he's going to have to do to rebuild.
Yeah. So again, if you follow what Linda and I teach, we teach the formula, right? So it's relationships plus validity plus value gaps over time. So what we thought we'd do is we wrote out, based on our conversation with him last night, really 4 key value gaps that we identified that he had. And then we'll kind of talk through how we work through those with him. So let's start with number 1, Linda. The first value gap that we noticed is he's definitely in build back mode.
Yep.
Right, he's basically restarting his business. He's I think it was a year and a half in.
Yeah.
So he's not starting from yesterday. He's in that mode though of rebuild. He has big goals to build his business back better than he had it before. That was the first value gap.
Yep.
Second value gap was his original team, like you said, was doing around 400 transactions. The challenge is a lot of his business was coming from Zillow.
Yep.
And so he was paying a lot of money, right, to generate lead. I forget what he said, but at one point, what were they spending a month on lead gen? Do you remember that?
I think it was $40,000, but I might just...
Yeah, so just imagine for a second, $40,000 a month on ad spend, right, just to generate that much business. So when all was said and done, I think he was doing about 130 deals himself, and their team was doing the rest of the 400, mostly from Zillow. And so what he was netting, not including his production, just the team, was around $100,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work and effort and headache for not a lot of money.
Yeah, and so you could definitely see that was a gap, but it's also an opportunity because we know from all the tools and stuff that we have at KW, we could actually help him build that team back. Because one of the things I noticed, Pres, is his splits were a little bit off.
Yeah.
They
were high.
They were high, yeah. So I saw lots of opportunities to help him build it back bigger, but you kind of have to sit and be quiet and just listen and let him kind of voice the pain.
Sure.
And not just try to give him all the answers at once.
Yeah, absolutely. The third value gap is, again, he had a ton of headaches from having a large team with the structure that he had. And the other thing I noticed in his language, Linda, was that he was getting all the phone calls. So all the complaints, all the gotta minutes, everything was going to him.
Yeah.
And so he even mentioned times where he was with his family, but he wasn't with his family.
Yeah.
He'd have to step out, which that's not
uncommon,
right?
Real estate, yeah. Yeah, and that's a sacrifice, because we always talk about family being the glass ball that nobody really wants to make. And so, that's another big area that I saw that we could actually help him tremendously.
Yeah. And then the fourth one, let me pull my list up here. Okay, the fourth one was that he was a RE/MAX agent, and he was pretty clear that he understood that he was on an island.
Right.
He had a really good financial structure with RE/MAX, but that's really the extent of the value that he received.
Yeah.
Right? He knew that in order for him to do what he really wanted to do, he needed a different environment.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, Pres, when you're in a situation like that, the last thing you need is to be alone. What you really need is around community and energy and excitement about the business, and watching other people, do the business and make you realize that, okay, this is possible. I just got to figure out what are the key things I need to do. And being on an island by yourself is not the way to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So before we kind of talk about some of the solutions that Linda and I, or ways that we guided the conversation based on identifying those 4 value gaps, one of the things I want to mention is you could definitely tell he lit up talking about his kids.
Yeah.
And so we took a minute to kind of pause from the business side, and we went down the path with him on learning more about his kids. And come to find out, his daughter is one of the best barrel riders in the country at the age of 10.
Yeah, it's amazing.
She's beating pros, and you could just tell he lit up. He talked about coaching his kids, how much he really loved doing that. So just a side note, I think it's really important you understand the human element in recruiting. Our job is not just to stay in coach mode all the time or try to solve their pain or their problems all the time. Part of what allows us to connect with people is going to the places that light them up.
Yeah, and I think too, you got to realize that people make decisions on emotion and justify with logic. And most people are emotional about their big why. And his big why was definitely learning from his mistakes on being away from his family and stuff too much, and not making that same mistake again.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of shift gears and talk a little bit around what was effective in the conversation, Linda. So the first thing is we had Linda share her story about building a big business and a big life at KW, right? He got to hear about your $600,000 in debt to building a team and getting coached by Gary, and some of the same pain points he was experiencing, you got to touch on. So again, remember, we teach you that you cannot make people do something they don't want to do. The only thing you can do is help them self-discover. And the way you do that is through great questions, stories, and experiences being the highest level. So we didn't come out of the gate and say, well, let me tell you what you should have done different. We just said, Linda jumped right into her story. Let me tell you a little bit about what it was like for me building my business.
Yeah.
And you could see him seeing himself through your story. And I think that was pretty powerful.
Right. And, I think the other thing too is sometimes people just want to know that somebody else has been through this. I mean, I remember years ago when Gary was coaching me, and I would have such a problem. I would think I was the only one. And when I would voice it to him, he'd say, oh yeah, let me tell you when that happened to me. And just somehow hearing that other people have had the same situations makes you feel like at least I'm on the right path and somebody understands what I'm going through.
Now, the second place we went to that was really effective is something that Linda and I teach very often, which is called the 4 C's.
Right.
And the 4 C's, if you've been listening to our podcast, you've heard us talk about before. But if not, it is the way your life gets big is you make big commitments. The first C being commitment. Then you drop into a place called courage. Courage doesn't feel good. It's an uncomfortable place to be because you don't yet have the third C, which is capabilities, right? You don't have the capabilities yet. But as you go on the journey, you'll figure out the capabilities, and that will give you confidence. That's the 4th C. And so Linda walked through that process with him. And Linda, what were your thoughts on that? I felt like he was very, that idea alone seemed to really resonate with him, realizing that he needed a big commitment to go make.
Yeah. Well, I think on that, because I think once you're a little bit afraid of success, and he admitted that, honestly, I'm just as afraid of success because the success he'd had before didn't feel very good, right? And it didn't give him the things that were important to him, which was time with his family and amount of money that he really needed to be rewarded for what he was doing. So I think you almost have a little bit of fear of success and move into complacency. So I think him seeing that the way out of the situation would be to make a big commitment and to let that big commitment pull him through the procrastination or the dread or whatever he was actually experiencing.
Yeah. The third place that we went that was effective was, he talked about one of his biggest things that was time. Objection was timing.
Yeah.
Like, I've got it's not a good time. I'm trying to figure out the right time.
I need more change.
Yeah, I'm not sure change is going to help me right now. So let me kind of hit that real quick. The two biggest objections we heard were messing up his momentum. So basically, like, I'm worried about changing. And then second was timing. And so what was great about that, the way we overcame that is, and this is true in life, right? For a performer, there's never a great time. And sometimes with things like that, you just have to say the truth.
Yeah.
And, you say it in a loving and caring way, but, I looked at him and I said, the truth for you is there's never going to be a great time.
Yeah.
Because you're a performer and you're going to keep doing it. And so the longer you wait, timing's not going to get better the more you're doing. And that really resonated with him. I said the way you do it is you pick the time and you make it the right time. Yeah. And that definitely seemed like it resonated with him in terms of, wrestling with this idea that there was going to be this magical timing that just opened up, which we all know never happens. Yeah. The fourth thing that was effective is, and we teach this, right? We talked about Linda sharing her story, but sometimes, like, not all of us are Linda McKissack, so we may not have that story. You can use other people's stories, and they will see their life through those stories. So we shared a story about a mega agent that Linda and I recruited and worked with, and he joined KW, and in 2.5 years, his business basically when he joined us it was not in a good place. He was down to about it was him and 2 other agents, and at one point he had a much bigger team, and it had kind of crumbled because he didn't have a solid foundation. And he joined us at about 15 million at the time, and in 2.5 years, this year actually he'll do about 80 million in business. Yeah. And we shared that story about how he did that and how he leveraged a move as his way to really be part of his marketing plan, and how that was actually a benefit to him, not a takeaway. And that was also, I think, very effective.
Yeah, and I think with any top producer, honestly, when they get in certain situations or they make certain commitments, they will figure out a way to follow through, and helping them see that part of what you got to do is make something that really causes your adrenaline to kick in and you to figure out a solution of how to keep moving forward and not go backwards. And a couple of things, Pres. The person that actually had brought him to dinner started asking them to come to the class today that we were teaching. And so one of the things I've learned is if you can have something that you can give them or whatever get them to, that's good. And then second of all, something that you're going to give them when they get there. So I had brought some 10X is easier than 2X books. And so I said, hey, I'll hold one back for you tomorrow. Olivia's going to auction off some for KW Cares, and we'll just keep one back for you. So that gave him a little extra incentive to come today.
That builds
reciprocity. And then also, Pres, I didn't even tell you this part, but I'd actually had the booklet from Gary's CEO event where he talked about anti-fragile. I don't think you were there because the girls had their first day of school and you guys didn't get to come. But it talked about how stress is normal, how you're going to have peaks and valleys in your business. It's just normal. It's part of it. And part of what you use is to use that to make you more anti-fragile. And so I actually gave him that booklet, And I said, hey, because I do that. I think about somebody, and I even say a prayer that whatever I have tools-wise, I know what to give him that would help him the best. And it's so weird because I just threw that in my bag at the last minute when I left the home the other day to fly to Ohio. And I happened to be looking through my bag this morning, and I thought, oh, this would be so good for him. So I gave him that and said, hey, based on your situation, I just was looking through this, and I felt like this would be something that would be helpful to you. So as he looks through it, he's going to hear Gary's language about the stress is normal. You're going to go through those kind of situations, and part of it is for you to learn to be anti-fragile, right? And so I think that's going to be real beneficial. And I told the team leader what I had given him so that he could actually, and the team leader had gone to Gary's CEO thing, so he would have a good conversation piece when he picked up the phone to call him back. And so you want to have things that are, little nuggets that you can give, and then you want to think about these people and say, what could I give them, or what do I have in my toolbox that would really might help them and make them feel better. So anyway, that's kind of what I did, and I don't even think I even told you that, Pres.
No. Well, and I think I'm just reminded, Linda, we have such a gift of what we get at KW, right? You mentioned it. You mentioned it today at the regional leadership meeting. How many of you as lives have not been changed by KW? Every hand goes up when you ask whose life's been changed, and then you always say, and who are we to decide that enough lives have been changed? I'm just always convicted when we get in front of people that they need what we have, and we have such a gift of a company to be able to help people live a bigger life. And what was really cool is to hear people verbalize that today, and even in some of the other things that we've been teaching about lately, where people are just saying, KW is it's transformational. Yeah. It's about living your best life in a bigger life. And again, look for those opportunities where you can get in front of, don't pre-decide, as Linda always teaches us, don't pre-decide that someone will or someone won't. Look for the opportunities where you can find people and start genuine relationships with them, because you never know where it's going to lead. And gosh, the conversations are fun.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed you do, Pres, that I don't think you even noticed, that I think is super important, is he had brought a significant other with him. And rather than leave her completely out of the conversation, I noticed at one point, Pres starts asking her about her. And that is a lot of power in it, because how she feels when she left that is going to stick with her and may influence him to investigate who we are a little bit more. And I love that about Pres, because that's the way he is. He's an includer. He thinks about other people, and he was genuinely curious. And what do you do? What are you going through? And she was working on her master's in nursing. And so you just watched her light up to get to talk about it herself a little bit, because I'm sure in every meeting, she's sitting there. She hadn't talked all meeting. She's got to be bored out of her mind, right? Yeah. So how do we include her in? Yeah, that's right. I think that's going to go far.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We wanted you to take you inside of a real life situation. This is what Linda and I get the blessing to get to do all the time, and it's both fun, but there's so many lessons, and we always grow and learn from doing it. So it's fun for us to get to dissect this for you today. I hope you took away some nuggets around how you can be intentional, right? Use the formula that we teach you, because it's what we do, and it's very effective to help change lives.
So remember, if you've not hit the subscribe button, please go ahead and do that now. And if you know a profit share story that would be great for us to feature on the podcast, we've had some great ones already. We'd love to have you share that with us. And also pass this podcast along to anybody in Keller Williams that you think would benefit from these conversations. So remember, we're on a movement to get people to understand the value and the gift of profit share and take advantage of it. So I hope you'll join us in this movement, and we'll see you next month. Bye, Pres.
See ya.